To tonight's webinar. This is an interactive online experience and we want to hear from you. You can participate by asking questions, answering poll questions, and completing interactive activities. The majority of our time will be spent answering your questions. Let's spend a moment getting to know this Q&A environment. On your screen, you'll see the video and slides window and their corresponding icons. Should you want to minimize either, you can just click the icon, and you can also resize each of the windows. You will also see a studio chat tab and button. That is where you can engage in conversation with fellow attendees. And most importantly, you'll see the Q&A tab. That is where you can ask us questions. All of our Q&As and webinars this year are accessible on computers, tablets, and smartphones, so you can even take us on the go. When you click on the resources icon, you'll find documents and other information that we'll mention during today's discussion. We'll also ask you to respond to some poll questions, which you'll see appear in the slides window. And at the conclusion of tonight's Q&A, please take a few minutes to complete our survey. It will automatically appear on your screen. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Staying Connected and Competitive and Current in Your Career, Part 1. My name is Janae Wheeler, and I'll be hosting this evening. Today, I'm joined in studio by Heather Tinsley-Fix, a Senior Advisor with AARP, and remotely by Stan Kimmer of Total Engagement Consulting by Kimmer, and Lori Maida of Work at Home Vintage Experts. Welcome, Heather, Stan, and Lori. Today's conversation is part 1 of a 2-part conversation. Well, we'll answer your questions about how technology can help you improve your job search and keep pace in the workplace. Part 1 focuses on technology and your job search. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll highlight navigating through online applications and applicant tracking systems, best practices for online resumes, where to search online for jobs, leveraging technology to change careers, interviewing via video chat programs such as Skype, and verbalizing and demonstrating tech skills to employees. You can ask a question at any time. Just type your question in the Q&A box on your screen. We will answer as many questions as possible during our time together. First, we have a quick poll question for you today. We want to know, have you recently applied for a job online? If so, was it within the past month, within the past 6 months, within the past year, more than 1 year ago, more than 5 years ago, or never? Select the answer on the screen that applies to you and click Submit. We'll talk more about how and where you can find jobs online in just a few minutes. We also encourage you to share your tips and stories with us about how you can leverage technology to stay connected, competitive, and current in your career. Let's take a look at your responses. Wow, it looks like 47% of you all have applied for jobs online. We know that is a main avenue for applying for jobs nowadays. Now let's dive right into your questions. Don't forget, you can ask a question at any time. In the meantime, we're going to cover questions that you submitted to us by email prior to tonight's webinar. The first question I have comes from Chris. What are applicant tracking systems? Heather, could you tell us?
Sure, it's a really good question. So an applicant tracking system is a system that employers use that allows them to capture all of the resumes that are coming in for the jobs that they've posted on job boards and on their own career site. And it's a system that allows them to sort through those resumes, to analyze them with natural language analysis. This is where the keywords come in, which we'll cover later. And then organize them and sort through which ones they want to pass on to the hiring manager. So at the point where they pass the resumes on to the hiring manager or to the committee that's doing the hiring, that's when the human element comes in and they're reading through. But prior to that, because there's the volume of applications that organizations get, the applicant tracking system helps weed out what they think are not eligible candidates, which is why it's really important when you apply for a job every single time that the resume needs to reflect what the job description says.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Now that we know what an applicant tracking system is, I have a question from Buddy. And Stan, I'm hoping you could give us your insights. He asks, how can he format his resume so it gets through the online screening process?
Well, actually, if you look at the chart that's on the screen now in the middle, you see this screening process portrayed. And what happens is a lot of applications automatically get thrown out by the systems without anybody ever looking at them with real eyes. And there's things that companies might be looking for, like a lot of companies will only consider people that have over a 3.0 GPA in college. So if you have like a 2.8, you might not want to put that on your resume. And also they might be looking for certain graduation dates or certain starting work dates that they might throw people out. So you might want to ask yourself, is there anything in my resume that could be a red flag and that some sort of computer system might actually kick out? And if there is anything questionable like that, then it might be best not to put it on the resume.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Lori, what do you think?
Sure. Well, depending how an employer may ask for a resume to be uploaded, you may want to have your resume saved in different formats: PDF, DOC, DOCX, TXT for text. But typically, if you keep it in a PDF document, it wouldn't change the formatting. So it would maintain the formatting in your resume, which is great. Some other things is, we've all been taught over the years not to have a long resume, maybe keep it to one page. These days, and with ATS, you can have a resume within reason as long as you want. I would just recommend that make sure your content of your resume is relevant and factual, and as Heather mentioned, searchable by keywords. That's important. And keep it simple. Don't use fancy fonts and too many bullets. An ATS system is reading your resume. So the simpler it is, the easier it will be for it to read it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So let's say we've applied all of these tips and this counsel you've given, and you're going to start looking for a new job. We have a question from Lucas. He says he's been at his current job for 11 years and he's just growing bored. So now where's the best place for him to look online for a new job? Heather, where would you recommend?
Well, Lucas, we actually have an online job board at AARP. So you can find that by going to aarp.org/jobs. One thing to note about our job board is that we have a number of employers who have signed the AARP Employer Pledge, publicly stating that they value experienced workers like all of you, and they're posting their jobs on our job board, so check that out. The AARP job board is an example of what we call a niche job board, and those are great for finding finding targeted jobs. For example, there might be a job board aimed at tech folks or veterans or people in the legal profession. So there's a lot of different niche job boards that, based on your experience or your diversity elements, you might want to take a look at. And then lastly, of course, the biggies, Indeed and Monster, those are, they're going to have jobs from everywhere. And the best thing to do there is to make sure your search is very targeted. So you want to search by job type, obviously by geography, and that kind of thing. And one last thing I would mention too is if you're interested in working very locally, like for a small organization, a lot of times those companies will post their jobs on Craigslist. So check that out. Yeah, especially smaller organizations that don't have huge budgets to post on these big boards.
Excellent. Interesting. Thank you for sharing those. Stan, do you have some resources for our guest?
Yes, and if you look at the chart that's in front of you right now, it actually shows you what Heather was talking about in terms of diversifying your job search. You can look at your various diversity constituencies. Are you a woman? Are you Hispanic? Are you LGBT? Are you a person with disabilities? There's lots of job sites out there, and these are hot links, right in the presentation. Then you can look at particular job functions. Are you in finance? Are you in IT? Are you a healthcare worker? And then finally, go to the big ones, the all-purpose boards, Monster, Indeed, etc. And so the more different various dimensions you look at and the more you diversify your search, the better your chances.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you gave us so many rich resources. Now, let's say you are utilizing these resources and maybe some other sites, and you find a job posting that just seems too good to be true. This has recently happened to Renata. She's interested in working from home. However, she's worried that some of these postings just sound too good to be true. Are there any tips? Lori, do you have any tips for that?
Sure. Well, of course, working from home is very enticing. Um, but there are some red flags. So there are great companies out there who do offer remote work at home positions, but there are some red flags to be aware of. One would be if someone is using a Gmail account or a generic email and not a business email. Just have your a red flag about that. Also, if their only way of communicating with you is online chat and not directly, be aware of that. I would suggest that if they put in their posting that no training required, that may be something you want to look into a little bit more as well. And also, if you are asked to lay out any money prior to employment, that is a big red flag. It may be for training or material or even a uniform. You shouldn't be asked to lay out any money up front.
Oh, thank you for sharing those red flags. Stan, are there any red flags that you could note for the audience?
And also, when you do get one of these very suspicious looking job offers or opportunities, feel free to Google the phone number or the email address that's given, because if it is a scam, more than likely other people have also received it and they've probably reported it on scam boards. Just Google the phone number and it could already be reported, 50 reports of a scam. Honestly, working 3 hours a day from home and making $60,000 a year, yeah, everybody's going to want that job. Basically, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably not true.
Very wise counsel. What do you say, Heather?
Well, Stan and Lori covered it really well, but I would just add that if anyone is asking for your personal information prior to starting a job, or not prior to starting, but as part of the sell of this job, definitely steer clear of that. That could just be a phishing scheme to get your personal information.
Oh, wow. It's unfortunate you have to be that diligent while you're on the job search, and there are people out there who would take advantage of the situation. Now, thinking of making sure that you have the skills that you need, Jenny mentioned that she has the basic knowledge of Microsoft Office and some other social media sites, which is great. However, there's not much else that she has any tenured prowess in. So how can she learn about software for free or even inexpensive programs to help her boost her tech knowledge? Stan, what do you say?
I think, there's many great opportunities, community colleges, networking groups, the library, just searching for things online. But one thing I would recommend is, going to some networking groups and doing some research to find out what are the latest emerging technologies. That things change very quickly in the technology world, and something that was hot 2 years ago is probably out of fashion. What are the new emerging things that people are looking for in employees? And maybe spend a little time learning those latest tools.
Excellent. Heather, what would you suggest?
I would say, so Stan, very good advice from Stan about attending networking groups and trying to figure out what in the job industry or profession you're in, what's hot. But in general, I would say, if you have basic Microsoft Office knowledge, I would double down on Excel skills. And the reason I say that is because being able to signal to employers that you are good at or proficient with data, either manipulating it, analyzing it, you don't have to necessarily know have a data analysis degree to demonstrate that you can work with data. Excel is the perfect application for doing that, just like at the basic entry level. And so making sure you know how to do things like create pivot tables or create formulas in Excel, scrub data, upload it. Those are all things that are pretty easy to learn. And I gotta say, actually, YouTube is a great place to learn. I have more than once I have gone on YouTube to figure out how to do something with Excel. So that's a good place to learn for free. Another thing I would say in general is that in terms of just basic digital fluency, make sure you are comfortable with what is often called collaboration software. So this would be platforms like instant messaging or Slack or any kind of, or Basecamp, those kinds of collaboration websites where you put notes or chat with people and you conduct work that way. that's a really great way to increase your tech skills. And I'm sure that there's like tutorials out there on YouTube or just Googling those. Those are the two areas that I would like really double down on basic tech skills.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for sharing that with us. Lori, what tips do you have?
Well, in addition to what Heather and Stan said, a good resource that may be right in front of you across the dinner table is enlisting the help of a relative, a friend, even for some of us, a grandchild who may know these programs more than we do. But what I did want to point out is once you learn these skills, that you go back and update your resume so it's included, so you could discuss that during your interview process and keep your resume current with all the new skills you're learning.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing those. Now let's take a quick break. If you have tips for how technology can aid in your job search process, share them here. Just click on the chat bubble icon on your screen or type them in the Q&A box, and we'll share your comments shortly. Excellent. So I see them coming in. Thank you so much. We'll get to more questions in just a moment, but I want to let you know that you can visit AARP.org, learn at 50 plus, that's 50 plus, and AARP.org/work for more information on how you can stay connected, competitive, and current in your career. Let's see what other questions have come in. Ooh, I love this question. And everyone feel free to jump in. Now, how can you make your online application stand out? Heather, what would you say?
I would say think outside the box when it comes to the type of what we like to call soft skills that you have undoubtedly accumulated over all of your experience. So this would be things like critical thinking, problem solving, relationship management, professionalism. Another one that's really important to signal is adaptability. It's a really important thing to let employers know that you are adaptable, that you're a lifelong learner. So, and these can be skills that you've acquired on the job or in volunteering situations. So really cast a wide net when you think about these sort of higher order skills. And again, definitely make sure that the keywords and everything in the job description are in your resume. Another thing is to put your LinkedIn profile link on your resume. That's really key. And you've got to have a LinkedIn profile. That's just table stakes at this point. And if you have any social tags, like your Twitter handle, put those things on your resume because that's a way to signal and to show employers that you're active on social media. So those are some of my ideas. I really would like to hear what Stan has to say.
Awesome.
Yes, because I love that question. Because I always tell people, even when I'm doing, career coaching, what is your unique value proposition? What are some of those special skills that you have that many others don't have? Because that is one way to differentiate yourself from the others. Because, 98% of the people are going to put good team player, on their resume. But, what do you have that's special? And then when you have that LinkedIn profile, make sure to also articulate results, like in 1 or 2 sentences. What are key things you've done in your career where you've actually delivered measurable results that really matter to the organization that you worked for? Because people want to hire people that are going to get results.
Absolutely, yes. The employers are definitely looking for those who can push the needle and really affect change in their organization. Now, in some organizations, they're using specified software, and one that I've seen is pretty common is Microsoft 365. So Mitchell asked, how do you get Microsoft 365 training?
I would imagine that Microsoft.com has a wealth of training resources because, of course, they're invested in you learning their programs. So take a look at that. I know I actually got a Microsoft 365 account a couple of years ago because I had a Mac at home and I needed to use Microsoft products on there, and it was pretty easy to find training. Again, I would say look out on YouTube. Those would be my ideas. What about Lori? Do you have any ideas on this?
Well, I agree. Microsoft, I believe, has tutorials, online tutorials, and there are, once again, you probably have resources available to you in friends or maybe even former coworkers who know Microsoft 365. But I would go online as well to, to Google it, and you look at YouTube and the tutorials and learn that way. They're really, really good these days, what they can show you, and then you can practice it.
Yeah, and I would also say, I mean, Microsoft 365 is essentially taking that suite of applications and just putting it in the cloud. So instead of downloading the software, you're just interacting with that software through the cloud or online, essentially. So it's not hugely different from the versions you probably are used to, but definitely check out the training modules, because like I said, I'm sure they have them.
Excellent. Everyone, keep those questions coming. Remember, you can click on Ask a Question under the Q&A box to insert your question now. Here is a great question. Goes in the line of using like job search engines. Olivia wants to know, how do you find a part-time versus a full-time job?
Well, a lot of job boards have that as a filter. So when you're searching, you type in the keywords that you're searching on, but then there's like a whole series of filters that you can use. And sometimes part-time is a filter. If not, just put it in there, put it in the keywords. And it's also possible that there might be job boards that specifically focus on part-time jobs. Lori, what about work-at-home vintage experts? Do you guys explicitly call out or like focus on part-time work in a specific job board?
Right.
Or how do you do it?
Right. Yes. So with our firm, and we're insurance specific, and we have an accounting wing as well. So we have a minimum hours of 20 hours. So we have part-time and full-time positions that we fill, so that we're looking for candidates with who are available anywhere from 20 to 40 hours per week. So we will filter that out, but people do not, the way our proprietary system is as well, our ATS, it will filter that out automatically when asking how many hours someone is looking to work. So, but anywhere from 20 to 40 hours. Be aware, I would suggest though, some people use the term part-time differently. So some employers may think part-time is 20 hours. Some may say part-time is temporary. So try to get an answer to that, what they're actually referencing when they say part-time.
Excellent. Well, another question that may come up in the interview process, along with part-time or full-time employment and what they mean, is the expected salary question. So how would you suggest that Ravi approaches that question when it comes up?
So he's asking that it's being asked of him?
Asked of him.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very tricky situation, or at least it requires a certain amount of delicacy. So I would not be pulled on questions of salary until you're a couple of interviews in. So you can, you can defer and say, well, we can talk about a range later. Definitely also mention a range. Like when you start to get into those conversations, talk about a range. Do, as much as possible, do your research beforehand. Some states don't. Connecticut recently just passed a law that prohibits employers from asking that question. So it depends on the state you live in. Lastly, look at salary ranges. I mean, it's really important to make sure that, because now employers are looking to hire, are pinning the salary to the position, what the position will bear. And if you come with a wealth of experience, this is something I tell employers all the time. Don't assume that older workers across the board are going to want super high salaries. They might be trying to transition into a new job. And so just make sure that you look at what that type of position bears in the market, and then use that range there for yourself. But definitely, like I said, talk about a range and wait until later in the sort of like midway through, I would say, the interview process.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Excellent. Now, Stan, this is a question I'm hoping you can weigh in on for us. How would you explain an 8 or 10-year gap in employment?
Well, I feel the best policy is just to be totally honest. And, a lot of cases it could be a person who took off time to raise a family. If you were jailed or something like that, it's a little bit more delicate. And you, of course, only want to be applying for jobs that are not related to the crime that you committed. So like if you were embezzled, you probably wouldn't want to apply for an accounting job. If you were things like raising a family, you should just legitimately lay it out there. And a lot of people respect the diversity of people who might have gaps in their employment. And during those gaps, if you did any kind of volunteer work or board work or anything else that built your skills, don't be afraid to share that, hey, I did take time off, but I coached these teams and I worked with these children and I learned these certain skills, and use that to your advantage.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I would like to sort of capture or to extend on that. I would say, particularly in caregiving situations, you can really make a strong case for things like I developed high powers of organization. I had to negotiate with the care providers for getting my loved one's health records. There's a lot of things, particularly in a caregiving situation, that bolster your skills. So you can mention that if that's the reason that you took the time off.
Ah, excellent. Now, in like a caregiving situation, you build a lot of soft skills that have a lot of value. Karen wants to know, how do you highlight those soft skills? Should it be done on the resume? Is that something you save for the interview itself?
That's a really good question. I think I would say put it on your resume. Yeah, definitely. I'm sure, Stan, I don't know if you have good counsel on this in terms of how to sort of reflect, for example, volunteer work and the skills that you get there, but that would be where the way that you would do that treatment on your resume would probably be the same for those caregiving skills. Yeah,
and I would usually say that most resumes have a section that say key skills, and you kind of list the skills that you got, on previous jobs in volunteer positions, et cetera. And usually within the job areas of the resume, you focus on your roles and responsibilities and especially key accomplishments. But the general skills section can cover skills that you get from a variety of areas.
Excellent. Now, this question I think is going to be very key, the answer that you give for everyone, because we're thinking of being competitive and current on our resumes and in our job search. So Yvonne wants to know, do you have to customize your resume for every position you apply for?
I really hate to say this, but the answer is yes. It really does. And it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a completely different resume every single time. Obviously, there's going to be similarity across. There's going to be some continuity. But definitely, in order to have the best chance of getting through that applicant tracking system and really demonstrating your suitability for that job, you really do need to. And Lori, you're a recruiter. I would love to get your perspective on this, but I feel like you do every time have to customize it.
I would say that you would at least need to customize it for every industry. If you're not set in the one industry that your experience is in, and you are trying to cross into another industry, or you have to cross into another industry, I would suggest at least then picking up some of those keywords that are pertinent in that industry and making sure that it is in your resume, as long as it's obviously factual. But yes, I would customize it at least based on the industry.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Well, it looks like we're out of time. I'd love to get last tips from all of our speakers. Stan, any last tips to share?
Yes, first of all, do diversify your job search. When you think about it, probably 100 or 200 people apply, for each online job. So don't just apply to 2 online jobs and think you got it fixed. Go ahead and go to networking groups, exploit or leverage your contacts, follow up those key applications that you've filed by making a phone call or asking if you can actually do an in-person interview. And on your resume, focus on those key skills and really try to differentiate yourself. But, diversify and use many different avenues for your job search.
Excellent. Thank you. Heather?
I would say take any opportunity you can in your existing job to gain new skills, even if that's doing it sort of off the side of your desk, as we say. Try and get involved in employee resource groups, or find other ways that you can advance your skills at work. It's really important to make sure that you're keeping your hand in. And then the other thing I would say is just make sure that you Practice. I know this sort of seems like old-fashioned advice, but honestly, like, we didn't get a chance to talk very much about Skype interviews, for example, but like, practicing anything new that you're going to have to go into, like a Skype interview or working on a new platform, like a new chat platform or something. The more you practice, when the stakes are low and no one's watching, the better off you're going to be when it comes down to the real thing. So practice and upskill.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lori?
Well, while it's important to spend time on your resume so it's attractive to the applicant tracking systems, it's equally as important to invest time in networking, making new connections, perhaps reconnecting with people you've lost touch with. You have more connections than you may think because you have a wealth of experience behind you. And the best source for hiring is through referrals. So don't wait to network and have your resume ready to go.
Excellent. Well, we're going to talk more about these topics in part 2 of this conversation, taking place next Wednesday, June 27th from 7 to 7:30 Eastern Time. You can register now by clicking on the link in the resources folder or go on your screen to aarp.org/learn@50+. In part 2, we'll talk about tech skills needed to stay competitive on the job, ways to stay safe online, organization and productivity tools, why innovation can result in success, creative thinking and problem solving, and how to navigate changing workplace technologies. If you have any questions about any of these topics, including what we covered tonight, email onlinelearning@aarp.org and we'll try to answer them on Wednesday. And don't forget, you can visit aarp.org/learn@50+ and aarp.org/work for more information on how you can leverage technology in your job search and on the job. You can access all of the links, including the on-demand version of this week's session and content mentioned this evening, by clicking on the resources icon. There, you'll also find links to interactive videos and other helpful tips and tools to help you stay connected, competitive, and current in your career. Please make sure you take a few minutes to complete our survey. It will automatically appear on your screen in just a moment. We hope to see you here next Wednesday. A huge thank you to Heather, Stan, and Lori for joining us this evening. And to everyone, have a great evening.